week 10 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few wide receivers I look to get off the waiver wire this week. The first guy, Tank Dell, of the Houston Texans. So Tank Dell had a breakout game, and him and C.J. Stroud, the two rookies, really turned that franchise around in a short period of time. It looks like over there in Houston. At least they're competitive. At least they're winning exciting games. I know the record not all that great, but they are 4-3 on the season here, is this Houston Texan team. So right now, I know they're 4-4 on the season here as this Houston Texan team, but way better than they've been over the last few seasons. So Tank Dell, we saw early in the season, week 2 and 3 have big games. Then he dwindled off a little bit, got injured, and then he came back with a great game in week 9 versus Tampa Bay. 6 catches, 114 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. So week 10, a tougher matchup, no doubt about it, at the Cincinnati Bengals. But it's surprising to me that Dell was still out there in 52% of fantasy leagues. We know he's a speedy wide receiver. He's starting to get the routes going, and him and C.J. Stroud, these two rookies, are on the same page and making big plays here for this Houston Texan team. So right now, if Dell was dropping your fantasy leagues over the last few weeks, fantasy owners got to go out there and go get him, because right now he's the number 2 option in this offense behind Nico Collins. Even though the next guy I'm talking about is teammate Noah Brown, he came off IR a couple weeks ago and he put up a monster ball game as well. So right now, this Texan team, the offense looked great. I know last week at Carolina, they couldn't get anything going, but versus Tampa Bay in week 9, a big game. So while Dell's out there in 52% of fantasy league and has great upside, he's definitely a top ad at the position this week. The next wide receivers, Noah Brown, his teammate of the Houston Texans. So Noah Brown, we've seen him last season, some flashes with the Dallas Cowboys, and then the Texans signed him up pretty quickly in free agency in the offseason. And now the last 2 games, he's starting to get back a rhythm after missing weeks 2 to 5 was Noah Brown. Week 8 at Carolina, 3 catches, 57 yards. And then week 9 versus Tampa Bay with a breakout game, 6 catches, 153 receiving yards and a touchdown. So right now this offense was clicking. 3 solid wide receivers, obviously Nico Collins, Noah Brown, and Tank Dell, with Robert Woods pretty much the guy phased out in this offense over here for the Houston Texan team. And Dalton Schultz, what a game it was for him. So right now, Stroud, a lot of good weapons and guys who can make plays. So Matt Brown available in 98% of fantasy leagues. It definitely could have been a fluky game where just everything was connecting. But a guy coming off a 153-yard game definitely is someone I got to mention this week on the waiver wire. Next receiver is Demario Douglas of the New England Patriots. It's pretty much Devontae Parker, Juju, and Douglas is the main receivers on this team. I know Jalen Reagor is over there as well for this Pat team, but Douglas, a speedy wide receiver, and once again playing a ton of snaps over the last 2 weeks here is Douglas. So the last few games, week 7 versus Buffalo, 4 catches, 54 yards, 20 rush yards. Week 8 in Miami, 5 catches, 25 yards. And week 9 versus the Commanders, 5 catches, 55 yards. So week 10, a Germany game here versus the Indianapolis Colts. And like I said, this Patriot team, they don't have much on this offense. So Demario Douglas, he's out there in tons of fantasy leagues at 65%. He's a speedy wide receiver. And this Patriot team, we know their season is done this year with only 2 wins on the season, where right now it's about all the young guys and seeing what they got. So right now, while Douglas is out there in a bunch of fantasy leagues and possibly could be the number 1 wide receiver for this team when it's all said and done this season, definitely give him an ad this week. Next wide out's Quentin Johnston of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Johnson, he was a first-round pick this season for the Charger team. So Mike Williams, we saw early in the season, out for the year. Now Joshua Palmer on injured reserve. Minimum going to miss 4 games. So Quentin Johnson, it's his time to step up, and we'll see what he could do as the number 2 wide receiver. And obviously this game's Monday Night Football here tonight between the Los Angeles Chargers and the New York Jets. So Quentin Johnson last week was the best game of his rookie career and his NFL career versus the Bears. 5 catches, 50 yards. And this week, a tough matchup versus the Jets, obviously, in New York, that give up the least amount of fantasy points to wideouts on the year. But Johnson, a big physical wide receiver. He could run the routes, and he was a first-round pick for a reason, to have a quarterback, obviously, like a Justin Herbert, to get him the football and stretch in the field. This kid has game-changing ability for fantasy owners, I believe, and could be a league winner for many guys as well. So he's definitely an ad this week. In the 5th and final wide receiver I have as an ad off the wire is Wan'Dale Robinson of the New York Giants. I know the Giants, they're down to DeVito at quarterback. It looked like Daniel Jones could have buckled that knee up and torn his ACL on the non-contact injury early in that ball game at the Vegas Raiders. So Wan'Dale Robinson finishing with 4 catches, 35 yards and a touchdown. So this Giant team, everyone's banged up, everyone's injured. We know Darren Waller, he's out on IR. Tyrod Taylor, IR as well. And then need someone to step up in this passing game. And there's going to be a lot of games we're going to be trailing a lot in this Giant team, especially with a game now versus the Dallas Cowboys, who we know their defense is pretty solid. And after coming off a tough loss versus the Eagles, you know, Wan'Dale Robinson and this Giant team, it's going to be a tough task. And they're going to have to throw the football a whole lot if they want to stay in it. So right now, well, he's available in 80% of fantasy leagues. I would give him an ad this week. So that's a few wide receivers I look to add off the wire here for week 10 of the fantasy football season.